The end of the internet. In this video, I want to go through number 1, when the internet will end. Number 2, how will it break? And number 3, what you can do about it. So let's start with when will it end? Well, here's the bad news. It already has. As you watch me on this video, you're watching me on an internet which is already broken. This is Tom Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. And here's the proposal for it that he wrote in 1989. His vision was an internet which had equality, neutrality, freedom, and no central control. And now here's a report of Tom being devastated because the internet that he dreamed of is dead. So what happened? Here is a book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which is by Shoshana Zuboff. This book was just shortlisted for the 2020 Orwell Prize. The Guardian calls it easily the most important book to be published this century. In this book, Shoshana, who is a Harvard professor and a social psychologist, goes into detail about how data companies are using and misusing our data to direct and misdirect us, which means they're taking what was meant to be free and neutral and making it directed and controlled. You've already heard from Shoshana if you've watched either of the Netflix documentaries, The Great Hack or The Social Dilemma, which both show just how much your data has already been hijacked by the biggest data companies. And you might be thinking, oh, that's okay, I just won't share my data. Or better yet, the government will just sort them out. But the problem is, it isn't these data companies which have actually broken the internet. It's the governments who have. Donald Trump's talk of banning TikTok or WhatsApp may sound reasonable given that China has already banned over 10,000 US websites. And that includes Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google, Wikipedia, and yep, even YouTube. But this is just part of a much bigger strategy to divide the entire internet into country-controlled cyber camps. Which brings us on to number 2, how will it break? And the answer is, it already has. From TechCrunch, the Splinternet is already here. There is no question that the arrival of a fragmented and divided internet is now upon us. The Splinternet, where cyberspace is controlled and regulated by different countries, is no longer just a concept, but now a dangerous reality. A few years ago, the Google CEO, Eric Schmidt, predicted that within 10 years, the internet would split into 2, controlled by the US and China. And the New York Times wrote, there may soon be 3 internets. America's won't necessarily be the best. What they both got wrong was the time frame. What they thought would take 10 years actually only took 2. Last November, Russia passed its sovereign internet law. It basically gives the Russian government the power to monitor and control all of its citizens' activity online and to create IP addresses walled off from the rest of the world. And that's now become known as the online Iron Curtain. China's President Xi, in the meantime, has declared a state of cyber sovereignty. And he has created the Great Firewall. He's carved out 850 million Chinese internet users into their own separate internet, which means that when they search online, they're seeing totally different things from you and me. So for example, they won't see this video. And when you search online, you don't get to see the Chinese sites that they see. And just for perspective, 850 million people, that's 2.5 times the entire population of America. And China is now growing their side of the Splinternet. This July, they extended their Chinese firewall to now also encompass Hong Kong. And from the Financial Times, inside China's controversial mission to reinvent the internet, China has announced a new IP created with Huawei to redesign the internet with governments in control of what can and can't be posted, as well as what can or can't be read or watched. And that's what's led to this news from this August. The Trump administration unveiled a wild plan to wall off China from the US internet. So banning TikTok is just the tip of the iceberg. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has announced a broad program to crack down on Chinese apps and services. The Clean Network program will block untrusted Chinese apps from app stores, stop Chinese phone companies from pre-installing US apps, keep US data off Chinese cloud services, and guard undersea cables. And this splintering and state control is accelerating. Listen to these mind-boggling stats which come from the latest Freedom of the Net report from Freedom House. Of the 3.8 billion people on the internet, 71% live in countries where individuals were arrested or imprisoned for posting content on political, social, or religious issues. 71%. You've got 65% who live in countries where individuals have been attacked or killed for their online activities. 59% live in countries where authorities deployed pro-government commentators to manipulate online discussions. 56% live in countries where political, social, or religious content was blocked online. And 46% live in countries where authorities totally disconnected internet or mobile networks. And almost all the 65 countries which were in the report have some level of either government surveillance or control. Only 20% of the countries, which is a tiny minority, actually have a free internet. And for those of you who say, oh, that's no problem, I'll just use a VPN to bypass the government. Many of these countries already ban VPNs, and their technology is getting better and better at being able to block them. So that brings us on to number 3. What can you do about it? Well, there's really 3 ways this is all going to play out. Ending number 1 is dystopia. This is when this trend of countries dividing and conquering the internet in such a way that you don't get to choose exactly what you get to see or do on the internet, well, that continues. And we have no choice but to either put up with it or log out. Ending number 2 is independence. This is when one or more groups comes up with a way where they can declare a truly independent internet and they recreate the original principles on a brand new system. Principles of equality, neutrality, freedom, and no central control. But this is easier said than done. Tim Berners-Lee, creator of the web, reveals plan to stop internet turning into digital dystopia. Well, that headline sounds promising, but what it comes down to is the best idea that Tim's come up with is to have a contract for the web, where he said, hopefully, if companies and governments will sign up for this, we can make the web a better place. And who were the first companies to sign up? Google and Facebook. And as for the governments, none of the ones I've mentioned already have even signed up yet. So the independence we're talking about here is not just a new contract, it's an actual independent network which is separate from the current government controlled network. One path is like the peer-to-peer network that the Hong Kong protesters started using so they could actually bypass the Chinese government. Or we might have to wait for some kind of peer-to-peer network of our global robot AI assistants when they finally arrive. It could be a virtual world on the lines of a multiplayer game. And in fact, the Metaverse is already being seen as the next internet, where we have a digital 3D world which actually follows us wherever we go and connects with our real world. And it's something which is not so easily blocked or controlled. The reality is we may have to wait until we have a full satellite network so that we can actually have a new internet which is out of the reach of the current governments. But that day could actually be closer than we think. From this week, Elon Musk says Starlink now has enough satellites in orbit to launch a public beta of its high-speed internet service. There's already 700 Starlink satellites which have the ability to beam down to Earth at 100 megabits per second internet access. So independence could be a possibility sooner than we think. And ending number 3 is revolution. That's where enough people get together and say it's not okay that governments having that much control and that much surveillance on our data. And so as a result of that, they actually start creating their own new nations. Far out as that might sound, it's actually not beyond belief that this can happen within our lifetime. From the World Economic Forum, countries are so last century, enter the net state. The short-lived reign of nation states is in decline. Many people, especially the newly digitally empowered, are less wedded to the idea of a nation state than were their predecessors. So the World Economic Forum is saying that nation states could eventually be replaced by city-states and net states. From Wired magazine, net states rule the world. We need to recognize their power. They exist largely online, enjoy international devotees, and advance belief-driven agendas that they pursue at times above the law. So the internet has actually birthed new organizing structures which are as different to nation states as nation states were to monarchies. Facebook and Google, in a way, are net states. They just happen to be acting like dictators without citizens and trying to work within state government rules. Future net states could have their own citizenship, their own internet, and be out of the hands of the current nation states. And if this all sounds like science fiction, remember that revolutions have always happened at the moments in history of highest discontent, and we currently are living at a time of highest discontent. So what do you think? Are we heading for a future which is going to be a dystopia, independence, or revolution? Maybe you've got a fourth thought. Whatever your thought is, I'd love to hear it, so please post it in the comment below. And here's the point. Depending on which one you think it's going to be, what you do is going to be different. If you believe it's going to be dystopia, you should log off and delete your data. If you believe it's going to be independence, you'll start looking out for the alternatives as they arrive. And if you believe it's going to be revolution, well, you might just choose to be the one that starts it. Those who believe dystopia will end up living in dystopia. Those who believe in independence will be the ones that create new structures. And those who believe in revolutions will be the ones who create the future. In the meantime, RIP the internet, because we're all just living in a corner of it now. And if you found this video useful, please do give it a like. And if you're even remotely interested in the future, do make sure you subscribe so that I can keep on passing on to you my insights and predictions. Sometimes they'll be right, sometimes they'll be wrong, but hopefully they'll always be thought-provoking. As Yogi Berra said, prediction is very hard, especially when it's about the future.